Welcome to another episode of my YouTube channel. Today I am here with Brian, and I think I met you on, I might have met you at a conference a few years ago, I'm not sure, but recently we got in touch through Facebook. I've been posting various things on my Facebook page, and Brian added some of his own comments to some of my posts. So in particular about the self. So I've been posting a lot about the topic of selfishness, and in some of Brian's comments, he mentioned, well, what about the self? That's a more fundamental idea than selfishness. Before you know what selfishness is, you have to have some idea of what the self is. So that's one topic that it seemed like you were interested in. So I guess we could just start by talking about that. I can turn it over to you, and you can tell me, what is it about the self that you're interested in knowing more about or exploring or whatever?
Well, it just comes from maybe agreeing with Ayn Rand that, okay, selfishness, it seems like that would be something we strive for, but then how do we do it? So how do we do selfishness? First, we're going to have to define the self in order to even carry this out, right? We have to have a good idea of what the self is if we're going to be rationally self-interested. So where do we start, right?
Okay, yeah, if we're going to be rationally self-interested and do what's good for ourselves, we have to know what the self is.
Yeah.
And I guess there's different views of what the self could be. So she says in certain places that the self is the mind.
Yeah.
I think on the Ayn Rand lexicon, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a website which has got, it's kind of like a mini encyclopedia of objectivism, and it has all these terms that come up in Ayn Rand's philosophy, and there's an entry there for the self. And I think in that entry she says, actually I was just looking at that before I call, so just to make sure I get it right, I can pull up what she says here. So in the very first entry under the term self, it says, a man's self is his mind, the faculty that perceives reality, forms judgments, chooses values. So there she not only says what the self is by saying that the self is man's
The mind.
mind, but then she goes on to say what the mind is. The mind is the faculty that perceives reality, forms judgments, chooses values. So that's from her essay, Selfishness Without a Self. So there's a little bit, which is in the book Philosophy Who Needs It. So there's a little on her view of what the self is.
Well, could you repeat those faculties that she says the mind does?
Yeah, it says the faculty that perceives reality, forms judgments, chooses values.
Chooses values. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think, do you think that's complete? Because maybe our self includes our body. Maybe it doesn't.
Well, it could be that there are different senses of self, some of which do include the body and some of which don't. I'm just reminded of another, there's more than one entry under the self. So in the second one, she says, she uses this phrase, that essential you.
Oh,
So just to read a little more of what this one says, the self you have betrayed is your mind. This is from one of the characters' speeches in one of her novels. So he's talking to an audience, and he says, the self you have betrayed is your mind. Self-esteem is reliance on one's power to think. The ego you seek, that essential you, which you cannot express or define, is not your emotions or inarticulate dreams, but your intellect, that judge of your supreme tribunal, whom you've impeached in order to drift away at the mercy of any stray shyster you describe as your feeling. So she gives a little more there. She again says that the self is the mind, but then she elaborates and she uses this phrase, essential you. And I was reminded of that when you mentioned the body, because I was thinking that, where did your picture go? Hold on a second. You're,
I
got
still
you
exist.
in this little screen, and I don't know how to make it big again. That's all right. So sometimes people say like, there's more to me than just a body, you know, love me for me, who I am essentially, which I think the way that's often meant when people say something like that is, don't just love me for my body. That's not who I am essentially. I have a mind, I have a soul, or you might use the term spirit. There's an inner part. So don't, it's just superficial if you only like someone for their external appearance. What's more essential about somebody is the internal aspect of it. At least that's, I think that's a common sentiment. So it might be that in certain contexts, that the term self could include something like the body. Like if someone uses physical force against you, punches you, you might say, don't hit me. That, so, and you might say, well, I didn't hit you, I just hit your body. I didn't hit your minds.
Yeah.
Although that gets a little bit complicated, because if you can feel it in your body, then you might say, oh, well, actually, in a sense, my body is, in a way, it's kind of conscious, because my feelings, there's something conscious. But maybe that's a bit of an aside. But anyways, I think in some contexts, it might make sense to include the body as part of a conception of a self. But in other contexts, I think there's a sense in which the self is contrasted with the body and is meant to focus more on the internal aspect of a person, which, you know, she says is the mind or consciousness.
I think somewhere she says that her ethics is about survival. So it would seem that selfishness is about survival. Possibly your body would be included. Maybe even like learning the right things to do with your body, learning the right ways to eat or to move it in order for it to be possibly pain-free or thrive.
Yeah, survival definitely is essential to her ethics, what her ethics is about. So on her view, ethics is about the standard of good and bad for her is what is promotes one's life or one's survival, and that's what's good, that which promotes one's life or survival, and that which the bad is that which detracts from one's survival or one's life. And of course, the body is a necessary part of survival. You can't survive as a ghost without a body. You need a body to survive. So yeah, if you're promoting your own survival, the survival of
Your body.
Yeah, so promoting your own survival would include promoting the survival of your body. And that would be part of what selfishness includes. It's not just doing things that are good for your mind, but also doing things that are good for your body. So, for example, eating well, getting enough sleep, things that we typically think of as physical, as opposed to mental or spiritual. Taking medicines if you're sick. So, yeah, maybe if we're thinking in this larger conception of self that isn't just focused on the mind, taking care of yourself would include taking care of your body.
Well, yeah, when we're talking survival, it seems like almost only really the body, like material needs, are survival. Physical things, right? There's not really much, I mean, mind work that you need to do to figure out how much to eat. And I mean, maybe there's a lot of work you could do learning about nutrition or something like that, but to just provide for your survival, it's just physical things. You need food and shelter.
I want to address that, but first I want to see if I can fix my screen here. It's bothering me. The I want to see if I can get it back to the way it looked when I started this. Hold on a second. All right, so
we touched on a lot. We touched on a lot of topics, and you said that passage, I think, from Atlas Shrugged a while back now. And what was interesting to me is that when she was explaining the mind, she explained it as the intellect, which was a further kind of a new word introduced to us. And so yourself is your mind, and then it's your intellect specifically.
Yeah, and she distinguished that from one's emotions and feelings.
Right. I wonder why, you know, my intellect, one of my tools would be me, and another one of my tools, my emotions, would not be me.
Right. Yeah, I think that's worth talking about some. I believe that this could be tied to volition. So, in her view, the mind is volitional, and that's what's directly under our control. Is well, you can distinguish parts of consciousness which are directly under one's control and parts which are not. So, emotions, they can just, or I guess they always occur automatically. So you might see something, watch a movie, and then some scene just, it makes you feel fear or delight or something, but you don't directly choose to have those emotions. You don't say, I am now going to choose to feel scared. It doesn't work that way. You have to see something and then, or hear something, or somehow be aware of something, and then that causes you to feel a certain way. But
I don't know that.
okay, well, just to finish this thought, and then we can consider objections to it. The intellect, on her view, the thinking part of the mind, is directly under one's control. One can directly choose to think or not to think. An example I sometimes like to use in this connection is imagine someone gives you a math problem and they say, do this in your head. 37 times 68.
Oh no.
What's the answer? Now you can choose to start trying to multiply it out. 37 times 68. Let's see. First, they're going to start with the ones column. So there's a 7 and an 8. So I'm going to multiply those. I get 56. All right. So I'm going to get a 6. And at any point during this process, you can just say, I'm not going to do this. This is too much work. I don't care about the answer. Or you can go ahead with it. But you have direct control over whether you continue that thinking process or not. So that's unlike the emotions, where you don't have direct control over whether you experience it or not at a given time. At least that's the claim. So we can now.
Where does that claim come from?
Well, just I think introspectively, that's what she would claim, at least. That's what we observe, that emotions seem to happen automatically and to not be under our direct volitional control, whereas our intellect, or the thinking part of us, we do have direct control over how that operates or whether it operates.
Well, I agree that most of us have control over the thinking mechanism, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people are torturing themselves with their thoughts going on all the time. They don't know how to turn it off. But as far as your emotions, like, what if I were just to say to you something like, maybe you're upset, and I say to you, calm down. like, is that meaningless, or is there something to that?
I don't know that it's meaningless. There might be something to that. Um, it could be interpreted as do something that will help you calm down. Like I don't know that you can directly calm down, but I mean, there's a whole issue of like psychotherapeutic practice and what is a good way to help people change their mental functioning. And depending on the circumstances, it might be different what you need to do in order to calm down. So someone might say, calm down, just focus on your breathing, and that will help you calm down. And so that might be something that you could have volitional control over. And as a result of that, focusing on your breathing, you would calm down. But I don't know that you can directly just calm down.
But isn't focusing on your breathing direct? Focus is a direct thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm claiming.
And yeah, focus is a direct thing. So we can focus on our emotions, like all the meditative traditions, Buddhism and Hinduism, they teach you to just focus, observe, be aware of the emotion, let it pass, don't be controlled by it. Or eventually you start learning to, maybe you don't manipulate it directly, as you said, but maybe you learn to change it very quickly. Maybe that's through manipulation of your breath or some other way.
So these meditative practices, which I'm not very familiar with, but I think I commonly hear that they say things like focus on your breath as a way of stilling the mind. So, but is this a way of, so is this a counter example to the idea that emotions happen automatically? Like if
your thought was that thoughts are things that we can control automatically, but emotions we cannot control automatically. We didn't discuss body, but I think body we can also control probably directly through direct focus. But you were saying that because emotions are automatic and thoughts we can control through direct focus, only thoughts are us, or only intellect is us and not the emotions, based on Rand's quote in Atlas Shrugged.
well, I think I want to be careful here. Thoughts can be distinguished from the act of thinking. So sometimes a thought, if we consider a thought to be something with content, like I just had the thought that I should ask my roommate to take out the trash next week. That thought might just pop into my mind automatically. So there's a sense in which thoughts can be automatic, but the action of thinking is what I think there's an element of volition there. Like I think the math example is helpful because it isolates the action of thinking from the content of thought. So I can choose to put forth the effort of doing this math problem, and if I do choose to put forth that effort, a certain thought might enter my mind automatically, like the ones digit is going to be a 6. I didn't choose that particular content, but I did choose to engage in the effort of thinking.
Focus. So, but then we can engage in the effort of focus with regards to our emotions as well.
Right. I mean, we can. So to flesh that out a bit, does that mean like we can focus on a particular emotion that we're having?
Yes, or you could just focus on something else. So say, like, one claim is that we can't change our emotions, but I would just think, why don't I focus on something else? And then say I was having a bad mood about somebody pulled their car in front of me while I'm driving. I'm thinking all these bad thoughts about it. I could just focus on something different, whether it's an emotion, a feeling in my body. I could focus on the landscape in front of me and not even have my thought turned on. I could do all sorts of things with my focus in order to make my emotions dissipate, my negative emotions.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right. So in that case, it sounds like what we're doing is not, uh, we're not directly changing the emotion. We're doing something that, as a result of doing it, changes the emotion. So if you feel angry because someone cuts you off on the freeway, and then you want to stop feeling that anger, and you can't just say, you can't just order yourself, stop feeling angry. It's still going to be angry. But if you say something like, think about the wonderful dinner you're going to have with your friend tonight or something,
Yeah,
focus on that. And then once you can choose to do that, and as a result of doing that, then the anger dissipates.
yeah, you cannot, through the intellect, convince yourself when you're angry with more thoughts about how to not get angry, because your thoughts are going to be circling around the thing that made you angry. So you can't just say, uh, don't be angry about that with your intellect. In fact, that won't even arise. You need to back up a bit and witness your thought. So you need to be the focusing agent again.
uh Perhaps, yeah. I mean, getting some distance from your emotion
Yeah. From
can,
your thoughts as well.
from your thoughts.
Yeah, if they're not purposeful, you definitely need to evaluate.
Yeah, getting a second opinion, getting someone else's opinion can.
No, I mean, if somebody pulls off or pulls in front of me in traffic and I'm upset about it, I'm having all these thoughts and they're not serving me whatsoever, right? So I need to back up and say, why is my mind even doing this right now? To turn off and on my intellect, like you were saying, we have that control.
Yeah, I mean, getting kind of meta about it, I think could be helpful. Meaning, um, thinking about your thinking, um, meta thinking, you might call it, could help get some distance from the thoughts that are causing you to feel this undesirable emotion.
I don't know if that would be thinking about thinking because we wouldn't be using a voice. We wouldn't be using that oral stream of words, A-U-R-A-L, as an auditory. You know, our thoughts go through our head in this stream that you hear, right? And then in the background is an atmosphere of emotion all the time. And you might think, oh, I don't have emotion right now. You might be feeling peacefulness or equanimity, but you always have thoughts and emotion in the background. And you can turn it off and on that thought if you wish.
Uh, yeah, I'm just making an adjustment here. I think your meta thoughts could be
It's
aural.
it, well, if you're meta, then you can't use words anymore, right? If you're witnessing thought, the witness of thought does not use words. So it's not thinking about thinking. It's not thought. The witness of the words is not doing words. The witness is just witnessing.
I don't see why that would be true. Like if I'm right now, let's say,
Only the intellect uses words. The witness is what turns on and off the intellect. It itself is not an intellect.
okay, you're bringing in this term witness. So maybe you have a particular thing in mind by that. But when I said meta thinking, uh, I just meant thinking about thinking, and I don't think there's like if I might be thinking about whatever this math problem, to go back to that example, and then I might have the thought about that process of thinking that it's boring. So that would be a thought about a second order thought. We might also use that language, a second order thought about the first order thought. So the first order thought being, what is 7 times 8? And then I can have a thought about that thought, namely that it's boring to perform this calculation. And that second order or meta thought, I think can also be in words. And so
Yeah. Yeah, that's thinking.
Yeah, so I think thinking and what I'm calling meta thinking can both be in words.
Okay, I understand you. So you're having another thought about some thoughts that you had previously. You call that meta thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I think doing that can help you to get some distance from the first order thoughts, the non-meta thoughts, if those non-meta thoughts or the first order thoughts are what's causing you to have this undesirable emotion. So this guy is such a jerk who cut me off. Maybe that's a first order thought you have. And then you can think about that thought and say, that thought is causing me to feel angry right now. And I don't want to feel anger. That's an unpleasant emotion. So instead, I'm going to focus on the upcoming dinner I'm going to have with my friend, and maybe that will help calm me down.
Okay, but I don't voice that. Do you? Like if I'm realizing that all happens in where I'm just, what am I doing here? And it's not voiced. And then I change my consciousness to something else. I don't say, why don't I think about dinner in my head again? You know?
I think it might vary from case to case. I mean, it might be implicit in some cases. You kind of have a subverbal thoughts to that effect, which if you put it into words would be the sort of thing I said. Other times maybe it is, at least partly, in explicit words. So I don't know that maybe like the center of the page example of a thought is something that is in explicit words, but I'm not sure that that the term thought has to only be used for acts of consciousness which involve explicit words. Maybe there can be implicit thoughts.
I was just thinking whenever I say thoughts, I just think of the voice that, the voice that you can turn on or off in your head. I don't really call like different things like what comes in on the seat of my consciousness is emotions, feelings from my body, thoughts. I'm able to examine all those things and look at them. But it feels like that would be me. That seat of looking at all those things would be me, rather than the separate tools I have: emotions, thoughts, body, or maybe all those 3 things are me.
Yeah. So what exactly does the self encompass? I made a little list here earlier of various things that have come up. So mind, body, emotions, thought, intellect, feeling. And I think it might just vary depending on the context as to what is relevant to include in the notion of a self or in the notion of me. So in the context, go ahead.
Well, I want to say, like, how can we go from there and then to acting selfishly? Like, is there a way we can, because if we leave one out, then we're not going to take care of our body, or we're not going to take care of our emotions, or we're not going to think, right?
So I think maybe it's helpful in figuring out how this is relevant to the topic of selfishness. Um, this contrast with other people is maybe the relevant sort of contrast. So the idea that it's good to be selfish, in Ayn Rand's sense of that term, is that it's good to live for yourself as opposed to other people. So it's often selfishness is contrasted with altruism, or the term egoism uh, is contrasted with altruism. Egoism is, another term that comes up in philosophy and in general, and Ayn Rand's philosophy in particular. So she has a lot to say about egoism versus altruism, or selfishness versus selflessness, where the altruism or the selflessness often means living for other people. And altruism literally means, etymologically, otherism. So there, I think the relevant sense of self doesn't doesn't
So how
really
do you
distinguish between mind and body. It's rather oneself versus other people. Or maybe you could think of it like this: one's own mind and body versus other people's minds and body. And what she's saying when she's saying be selfish is do what's good for your own mind and body, as opposed to those other mind body composites out there. Although, this is kind of a weird way of speaking. She thinks of people as indivisible entities with these two aspects, mind and body. Um,
so she thinks the self is mind and body and emotions.
well, I think I don't want to speak for her, but I think in certain contexts, like in ethical contexts, where the issue is, should I live for myself or should I live for others? In that kind of context, I don't think it's not obvious to me that one needs to make a distinction between
That kind of question though,
mind and body.
doesn't that get settled once you know what the self is? Like, should I live for myself or others? We're contrasting something that we don't even know what it is yet. Like, I think it's too far down the chain of ethics. We should go back to I guess the meta ethics and say, how are we even distinguishing between these two things if we haven't defined what self is? We can't say what selflessness is if we haven't defined self. We can't say what selfishness is if we haven't defined self.
So I think
How do we even know somebody's living selflessly or selfishly?
okay, so I mean, we have an idea. I mean, it's in a way it's perceptual. We can just see there are other people in the world. That's perceptually given. People are entities, and entities are given at the perceptual level, just like, there's rocks and cars and books and all these things in the world, and we see them as these discrete things, which can interact with each other. But
So the people we see who have the healthiest bodies, we could therefore determine they're the selfishness people.
uh, well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I'm trying to kind of build up to the idea of um, what selfishness is in this sense of living for yourself. Um, I mean, you were saying like, well, how do we know what it is to live selfishly if we don't yet have an idea of what the self is?
Yeah.
And I think we do have an idea of what the self is, and part of the way we get it is through this perceptual contrast of these different entities in the world. So we see that there are entities in the world, and we ourselves are entities. And I guess a child learns that at a certain point. He gets self-awareness. At first, a child or an animal is, I don't think, is aware of itself. It's just aware of the world. And at a certain point of development, it learns, I'm conscious of the world. This is something an animal might never reach. It sees the world, but it doesn't have an idea of itself in a way that a human being does. And I don't know if some of these mirror experiments, I think psychologists sometimes do. They like hold up a child to a mirror, and you can also do this with a dog or a cat or something. And some animals, I mean, they don't give any sign of recognizing that it is themselves that they're seeing in the mirror.
So the body.
So they whereas a human at a certain point realizes, oh, that's me, and they get a sense of themselves as a being in the world, like all these other beings that they're aware of. And so I think that's part of the foundation for getting an idea of what it is to be selfish. Now, I think there's more to it. Like, you need the idea of pleasure and pain.
Well, about that image of you, that is you, because that, I would say, that's an image of me that I see, a snapshot of my body right now, just like my body only in the mirror is what I'm seeing. And that's a snapshot of Brian's body right now in 2020. It's not what Brian's body looked like when he was 6 months old. And it's not what Brian's body will look like when he's 80 years old. It's just my body.
Yeah, it's your body at a given time. So, and you know, that body can change.
So we're saying the bounds of ourselves are where we stop feeling sensory information. Our body.
Well, I don't.
Because you were mentioning different entities.
Yeah.
Like we see different entities, and I guess, so where are we drawing the boundaries of you and me, right? Some people would include their property and their land as part of them because they need it for their body to survive. Some people would include the air around them, because if you take a human being and put him in outer space, he's going to die. So there's a whole bunch of things around you just outside of your sensory perception that are required for life, for your life. Are they you? Or should we go back further internally and say, not even the body and my property are me? They're just things that I use, tools that I use, or things that I feel.
So with things in your environment, I think it's at least less common. I don't know if it's ever right to say something in my environment, like this pencil I'm holding up is me, as opposed to
people will say, I have juice.
Yeah.
And then they drink it and they say, this juice is me.
Yeah, so there we have something crossing a boundary. So it's outside your body, and then it's no longer outside your body. And I think there are at least some contexts where it makes sense to say, now the juice is part of me. Once you've drank it, swallowed it. But when it's outside in the bottle, I can't think off the top of my head of a context where it makes sense, or where you need to epistemologically, like it would be useful to say, you know, the juice is me, as opposed to something I'm holding.
They'd say it's mine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the juice is mine. They wouldn't say it's me. But then a lot of people are identified with their body, but what if that's just wrong? What if their body is theirs? What if it isn't them? What if my body is mine? What if it's not me? I use my body. How could what I use be me?
So the So there are contexts where I think it makes sense. Like, to take an example from earlier, if someone hits you, punches you, you might say, "Don't hit me." And I guess there's a presupposition there that the body is part of you. If it's right to say, "Don't hit me," implying that you were hit, that implies the body is part of you.
Well, for communication purposes, you might say, don't hit me because it's faster than don't hit my body.
But there's also the aspect, which also I mentioned earlier, that you can feel that punch with your body. So there is something conscious about your body, which I guess relates to your point a minute ago about there's something sensory there. So like, what if you were, if you didn't have any feeling in the part of your body where you were hit, would it make sense, or would it make as much sense to say, "Don't hit me"?
They'd say, if they're paraplegic, they'd say, don't hit my legs. You might say, don't hit me. But it's just communication, right? It doesn't, if I call that me, it doesn't mean that it's not still my legs. My legs aren't me.
Okay, so you're
like if I'm trying to communicate that to someone by saying me, it doesn't, just because I said me, it doesn't make my legs me now. It doesn't change anything about it. It's just I'm communicating that.
So you think if the person were speaking strictly or literally, or long-windedly, he might say, "You hit my leg," and it wouldn't literally be true to say that the person hit him if it's just his leg, or I guess any part of his body that is hit. Is that the idea? It wouldn't literally be true. It would just be a shorthand way of speaking.
If he is not his body, then it wouldn't literally be true. If he is his body, then it is true.
Okay.
Have you ever heard some of the Hindu and Buddhist traditions say something like, I don't know who said it, but I am not my body and I am not my mind. Ever heard of that type of phrase?
No. I mean, I think I've heard in Western culture the idea, "I am not my body," trying to convey the idea that the essential me is the inner part of me, which came up earlier in the discussion. Mm-hmm. But the part about "I am not my mind's," that doesn't sound as Western. So
yeah, I guess, well, the mind is, we don't even know what that means, and we didn't define that either. It can be a big tent with our memories and our perceptions and our emotions and our thoughts and all these things, or it can be like some, I don't know, it can be something smaller, I guess.
Yeah, the mind, I think it can also be used in different senses, just as I think self can be used in different senses. So
anyway, back to the Eastern context. Usually what they mean by mind is just thoughts or intellect going on and on, right? And that's why it's a useful meditative phrase, to get people out of their incessant negative thinking, right? To distance themselves from their thoughts. And also your body, it can be useful when you're sick, to distance yourself from that, or when you're in pain.
Yeah, if you can, if there's a way to like disconnect from these painful sensations that are going through your body, that could definitely be helpful. Also reminds me of people who walk on hot coals, or who do something.
I've done that down by you in Las Vegas. I went to Tony Robbins to try that.
Oh, yeah?
It wasn't actually that hard.
Oh, did you like turn off your bodily feelings, or did it like feel really painful?
Actually, they spray our feet right when we're done it. So it was like by the time that you're starting to feel some pain, there's a trick because there's moisture and sweat on your feet. And if you walk across like 30 feet of hot coals, it burns off little bits of moisture before your actual skin really starts to fry. So, but I get your point. And whenever I'm sick or whenever I have a headache, I use my focus to focus on something other than the pain. The pleasure of my breath, uh, some kind of other pleasant thought, anything.
Mm, okay. So let's see. Where are we now? um,
We're thinking, is mind and body included in self? Because I was saying that um, what I was implying there is that it seems just like our focusing agent is really the root self, or just this power of focus.
so I guess my view right now, which I don't have like an official worked out uh, view, but at least a view that seems plausible in the thinking I've done so far on this topic, is that there are simply different contexts. And in some contexts, it makes sense to include both mind and body under the term self. Uh, in another context, it makes sense to only refer to the mind as the self. And I guess one just needs to keep straight which context is relevant at a given time.
And then for mind, you're saying like the intellect, as Ayn Rand was calling the mind, like the thoughts, or the big tent idea of mind, like emotions and perceptions coming in, and pain and pleasure and all these things that come into the consciousness.
So there might be a further distinction that needs to be made. So I mentioned two contexts. So one context in which mind and body are both included, and then another where just mind is included. But we want to further distinguish to your point just now, and say within the mind. Um, so there's the volitional act of focusing or thinking, and then there's the other stuff, the non-volitional stuff, one might think, like emotions, which just happen to you. Um, and you might want to carve those off and say those aren't as essentially me as is the directly volitional stuff that I have direct control over. So I think there might be a third context where you're even more fine-grained about what the self is. And in this more fine-grained way of looking at it, the self excludes some of the things that are conscious, like your emotions or even certain thoughts, because they just automatically pop into your mind. And what you're saying in this third context is that what my self is just the act of focusing or thinking.
Yeah.
So
That, I mean, it makes sense to me because that act of focus, um, that act, whatever it is, it's like some kind of amorphous, like it doesn't have a shape or anything like that. It's just some kind of energy. Uh, that thing has stayed the same for the whole time that I've called myself I. Whereas my thoughts, if I were to call my thoughts I, my thoughts change every day. You ask me like what my thoughts were last year, I would have had completely different thoughts. Same with values. So how can the I that is supposed to be staying the same be my thoughts when they change constantly? But this act of volition, that's always been me. Like it's never changed anymore.
mm, yeah, so there's something constant about the active focus as opposed to the particular thoughts that run through your head.
Or even body, like all of our, we're replacing our body all the time, just with food. Apparently all of our cells are replaced like in 12 months. And much of our body is not even human cells, it's bacterial cells, more than human cells, apparently. So all these things are getting replaced all the time, constantly. That, the act of will, is the only thing that's stayed the same for all of your memory, right?
In a way, yeah. So this is reminding me of the term personal identity, which is a topic in philosophy. There are different theories of what makes something the same across time, and there's a question not just for persons but just for objects. What makes an object, like a car, the same car across time? If you replace one tire, seems like the same car, right? If you replace
Yeah.
the other tire, if you replace the engine, how much of the car can you replace and have it still be the same car? In philosophy, the example that's often given is the ship of Theseus. Have you heard of this one?
They replace it brick by, or stone by stone? I don't know, wood by wood?
It's a boat, a ship, and it's made out of wooden planks. And the idea is you replace one plank at a time. Is it still the same ship? Is it still the same ship? Yeah. And at the end, you've replaced all the planks, and maybe you've even set aside the original planks and built an entirely new ship out of them. So now you have two ships. So which is the ship of Theseus? If you started out with this thing that you called the ship of Theseus, and then you replace it plank by plank, and then you end up with a second ship, is the second ship the ship of Theseus, or is the first? So where is the ship? And so this issue of identity applies not just to human beings, but to ordinary objects in the world. But I guess there are certain aspects of this issue of identity that are relevant, or particularly that are specific to human beings. There are things you might propose in the case of human beings as being what makes something the same across time that you wouldn't propose in the case of a ship, for example, like consciousness. If something has the same consciousness across time, maybe its body changes, but there's something the same about its consciousness. So maybe that, in the case of human beings, is what accounts for someone being the same person across time. Or memory, John Locke used that as his, if you can recall something, like, oh yeah, I remember doing this thing when I was 3 years old. So even though my body changed a lot between all these years, since I have a connection via my memory to doing this action when I was 3, therefore I'm the same person that did that action that I did.
Interesting, but I would just say I'm the same person because I'm the same energetic will that has always been there, rather than referencing my memory, which is something that's also changing, to say that, oh, my body was like that back then.
Yeah, there might be good reasons for...
Also, we can lose memory, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say we can forget things, so... But yet we still intuitively, to use that term, we might want to say, oh, I'm still the same person that did all the things I forgot, even though I forgot them. It's not like it was somebody else who did those things. So that could be a reason for wanting some other thing to account for personal identity. So you were proposing will as being...
Well, I don't think the issue of being there and sustained for the whole time is like the proof that will is ourself, but it's more like I back up and I look at myself, or I look at the things that are given to me, and I can witness my emotions. I can know what I'm feeling. I can feel what's going on in my body. I can witness my thoughts. I can decide to turn off my thought. So clearly my thought is a tool. Something that I turn off and on can't be me, because if it's off, what am I dead? So I would say that this one that's watching all those things is this oneness that is watching my body, watching my emotions, knows what my emotions are, knows whether I should think or not. That would be me.
The watcher, the watching conception of the me. So there is, I mean, there's, well, this is making me think of the distinction between the conceptual level and the perceptual level. So Ayn Rand sometimes says that it's the conceptual level that's volitional, um, whereas the perceptual level is automatic. So I just see things in the world. When I open my eyes, I don't have to choose to see the computer that's in front of me. It's just, you know, the photons strike my eye, and then automatically, kazam, I have this, I see this computer. But the
Certainly,
conceptual,
you can divert your focus from your perceptions.
yeah, to some extent at least.
Like I can easily just look internally, called introspection.
Right. Um, so there, we can direct what we focus on in perception to some extent. Uh, Maybe with the hot coals, you could focus on something other than the feet, maybe to an extent. I don't know if you can like do that forever, but maybe for a limited time, or maybe you can train up your ability to get better and better at focusing
You
on it.
probably, yeah, you've probably seen that Vietnamese monk who self-immolated in Vietnam. It's like a famous picture from the
Oh, he
Vietnam
burned
War.
himself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's also been people like Jesus Christ, right? All of these people that people look up to for their ability to not be swayed by the world's pain and anger, right? Even when he was nailed to a cross, he wasn't like screaming, you know, like a little wussy. He said, "Forgive them; they don't know what they are doing." He was completely loving, right? So we look up to these people because they're able to control that they're not at the whims of the world.
Well, I don't know if it's that they, of course, with Jesus, you know, there's a question of the historical accuracy of it, but just taking it for, if we assume the story is true, that he was nailed to the cross, I don't know if, I mean, also, you know, he's supposed to be divine, so that complicates the story. But if we just assume he's a normal person, and he's nailed to the cross, there's a question as to, does he still feel pain just like anyone would, and he just chooses to not express the agony in some external way, but he still feels it, or does he not even feel, or maybe feels it less than the regular person would? um, I don't know.
Well, there's techniques, right? So if monks can do it to the point of self-immolation, this type of meditative technique, then it's possible, right? Just have to get good at it rather than being a regular person.
So
Like regular people aren't very good at their emotions or anything like that.
the monks can feel less pain through practice. That's the idea.
Well, for example, say you have a headache. Most people are going to focus on their headache. So you could start with focusing away from it, right? If you're going to focus on your headache, of course it's going to feel like pain.
So I wonder if the monks are just good at focusing away from things that cause them pain, then I guess they're not, maybe they're not experiencing the pain as much or at all. Like the guy in the fire who set himself on fire, if he just was really good at focusing on things other than the pain, then maybe he didn't feel any pain at all because he was so good at diverting his focus to non-pain things.
Yeah.
So I guess the point I was making before we got into all this was that there's this distinction between the perceptual and the conceptual level, where the former, the perceptual level, is automatic and the conceptual is not. But I guess taking into account what we've just been talking about, I think you can kind of mess with that. You can override the automaticness of the perceptual level.
I think it would still be automatic. It's automatic. The perceptual level, it'll always be giving information to the field of consciousness. It's whether you're there and identified with that pain or not, which has always been a choice.
Yeah, so then I guess if that's right, then these abilities that monks have wouldn't be a counterexample to the idea that the perceptual level is automatic.
I don't think it would be, right? Their perceptions are still operating automatically. They're just choosing to, like, everything is coming in their body. Everything is behaving chemically normally, but they're looking at something else internally.
Okay. So I guess it's just what might make it seem not automatic is just that being present to something, like being in the environment of something, doesn't automatically cause you to have a certain feeling. So if the monk is in a fire, that doesn't automatically cause him pain. So in that sense,
for sure, it's causing his body pain, but him, if we say him as the witness is not involved with that.
well, can it cause the body pain if it's not causing him pain? Is that the idea? Like,
yeah, well, he would say that he's not his body and not his mind.
yeah, I mean, he could say that, and maybe there's a sense, at least, in which he would be right in some contexts to say his body is not, he is not his body, and we've talked about that some. I guess I'm less, I would need more persuading to get on board with the idea that he is not his mind. So I would want to know more about what he means exactly by that.
Yeah. I think when they talk about, the Eastern traditions talk about mind, they usually just mean thoughts. They don't mean the whole Western idea of a big tent mind, which includes like perceptions and memories and conceptualizations and stuff. They just think the thoughts, that oral stream of words, they call that mind. And they don't really distinguish of whether it's like, is it operating by logic or not? They don't really, they're not really so concerned about that. What they're more concerned about is, oh, just directly keep your emotions right. Because when you keep your emotions right, your intellect will work properly. So if you're joyful, for example, do you need to be taught a whole bunch of things about ethics, like don't kill the people around you and don't steal? No, you'll be creative when you're joyful. You'll be more productive when you're joyful. So they focus on affecting the emotions directly to affect the intellect.
So that's, I guess that's the reverse of what we were discussing earlier, where
right. I find it works successfully. At least I don't know if I'm actually doing it directly or not, but if I put myself into a good mood, I come up with greater solutions, more creativity. I'm more positive and I'm more productive and I'm better to work with all the people around me, right? So it's really important to pull yourself out of negative emotions, and then your thoughts won't circle around these negative things.
Maybe there's a reciprocal kind of relationship where um, having positive emotions can help to generate positive thoughts, and positive thoughts can help to generate positive emotions, and it's
Yeah.
kind of reinforcing each other.
To me, they both occur in the same space. To me, there are thoughts like, imagine a ticker board, like you would see at a basketball game, or like a news ticker board where all the writing's coming across the screen. That's how I think of my thoughts. And then behind it, the atmosphere is the emotions. You always have emotions in the presence of thoughts. That's what the atmosphere is, right? So they're both together always at once, unless you turn thoughts off. And then you still have emotion. It's the background.
Mm. Yeah, so I guess there are times when your emotions are more salient. Like if I'm just reading an article on Wikipedia or something, as I often do, um, sometimes I feel like I'm just consuming information, and I don't really feel noticeably positive or negative. But maybe that default is, maybe there is kind of a default positive feeling, like this is an okay thing to be doing, and I'm getting this valuable information, it's a worthwhile thing to be doing, and it's only so long as I have that kind of baseline approval kind of feeling that I feel comfortable continuing to read. If I'm starting to feel like this is not a good use of time, I should be doing something else, then I'll start, alarm bells, so to speak, will start to go off.
Yeah. I would say there must be emotions going on. They're just mild or close to neutral. So maybe we think of our emotions on a scale going up and down, with neutral right in the middle. You can really feel these emotions that are down here, like anger, like you're really aware of something very far from neutral, or great sadness. And then you're really aware of like excitement and love, things that are very high from neutral. But when you're around neutral, that's not really a big pull for you to be aware of your emotions. So you're just focusing on your thought. But you have to be careful that you're not headed into a mildly negative emotion just below neutral, where you're in critical mindedness, and then your thoughts are just always critical and they're not productive. Or you have to think, am I looking at this openly, neutrally, in equanimity, rather than just being below neutral?
I wonder if there is such a thing. I mean, it seems kind of like a contradiction to say that there's such a thing as a neutral emotion. Like it seems like by its very nature, an emotion has to be at least somewhat positive or somewhat negative. Otherwise, what kind of emotion is it?
Exactly. It is a charge, right? Or it's an energy. So maybe peaceful is pretty close to neutral, and maybe mildly annoyed is right below it.
Yeah, I think it's plausible that there's always some emotion that we're experiencing, and maybe it's kind of in the background and muted, not very salient. Other times it's very salient. But I think it's plausible that there's always some kind of emotion that's coloring your experience at any time. Although maybe the monks, they have a way of turning that off, and
Yeah, there's the question of that.
Okay, so have we made any progress here?
I think we're learning things, but I don't know if I feel like I want to lean toward the idea that myself as something to do with the really unique thing about me, like my will, where I get to make choice. I think that's kind of where I'm coming from now. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's at least one sense of self. And I think that is, I mean, that sounds like Ayn Rand's conception of the self, where she thinks of that essential you, to use that phrase. I think she uses that in reference to the intellect. I'm trying to go back to that quote. Um, the ego you seek, that essential you, which you cannot express or define, is not your emotions or inarticulate dreams, but your intellect, the judge of your supreme tribunal, whom you've impeached in order to drift at the mercy of any stray shyster you describe as your feeling. So
See,
she's saying there
that's
that
a hard definition of intellect for me to understand.
what's that?
That's a hard definition of intellect for me to understand.
Yeah, it's a bit long. So, but I think this is arguably another way of putting what you're saying. So if your idea is that the self is the will, I think that's compatible with saying, or maybe it's compatible with saying that yourself is the intellect, because your intellect, at least on her view, is volitional, i.e. it operates in a willful kind of way. The faculty of reason is the faculty of volition, on her view. Or to put it another way, reason is volitional.
Yes.
I.e. the intellect, which I think is basically what she means by reason. The intellect is volitional. So I think saying that you are your will is kind of like saying, or yourself is your will, is sort of like saying your reason or your intellect.
Oh, I thought you were going at volition. Like if you are your will and volition is something you need for reason, it seems like we are volition. We're like that added cause into the world.
Like we're the prime mover, the first cause.
Well, in some way, we're creating a cause because this will is not caused.
It's a causeless cause.
From what I see,
other things.
this space, which witnesses my thoughts, this the space has no cause to it, right? From what I understand. I watched Dr. Gatte's talk on Seize the Reins of Your Mind. Have you ever seen that talk?
Yeah.
It was a good one. And he said that the volition is self-caused.
Yeah, I don't remember that particular phrase from him in that talk, but I think I've seen that phrase used in connection with the objectivist idea of volition.
And that's very unique in this universe. There is nothing in your mind, like your thoughts all behave according to cause. There is nothing, your body will behave according to cause. It's only this thing which you have control of, this volition which doesn't behave according to the typical cause, in effect.
Yeah, so right, doesn't behave in the normal, or maybe it's biased or to say normal, but because it is normal, we do it all the time. It's just a different form of causation than exists in other parts of the world. Okay, so your idea is that the self, as you're now thinking of it, is the volitional aspect of us, the will.
Well, it's probably, maybe that's one way to describe it, right? Because what is this thing will? Like, the more you sit there and just try to be that when you meditate, the more things you could call it. You could call it like a timeless space. You could call it being in the now. You could call it a formless being. You can call it all sorts of things. You can call it an energy. So the more you meditate on it, the more you could possibly call it, I suppose.
Hmm. It's interesting that you're bringing up these meditation, uh, this meditation language, because those seem to be different than Ayn Rand's view that the self, or that essential you, is the intellect. It seems like the Buddhist kind of meditation idea is that you're getting away from the intellect in some way. And just her philosophy in general, I think, is quite non-Buddhist, and has a very, I mean, in a way, it's anti-Buddhist.
Did she comment on it, on Buddhism?
I think there are some things she said, like she I don't know. I could look in the lexicon here. She comments about Hinduism, I think, in a way that's kind of
Or
negative. But I think,
Hinduism is such like a box of so many different things thrown together, and it's hard to even, like, it's an amorphous blob. It's like 10 trillion different ideas and different philosophies, so it's so hard to say.
well, my impression is that in general, her view is opposed to the Eastern philosophies of like Hinduism or Buddhism. And I mean, maybe there's some way in which it's not
Maybe
opposed,
it's not.
but I think on the idea of like, it's, well, one thing is the conception of self. So in Eastern philosophy, based on the little I know about it, um, they have this conception of the self as being, or they think of the Western conception of the self as kind of illusory. So our individual self is an illusion, and the non-illusory self, the real self, is kind of this cosmic thing that I think they call it Brahman sometimes, or Atman.
Similar, similar to the Stoics, they said God was this thing in everything and at the root of you. I think the Buddhists say something like, yeah, nirvana, or they call it consciousness, um, is the root of you.
So they have a different conception of the self, which is, you might.
Well, we don't know what Ayn Rand's conception of the self is yet. We got to intellect, but then she said it was a court and tribunal thing, so that wasn't a very good definition for me.
Well, I think an aspect of her view of the self is what we might call individualized, whereas the Buddhist conception, maybe a good term for it is, um, I don't know, universalized or collectivized as opposed to individualized. So she thinks that
Yeah, universe.
each individual human being, like Brian, is one locus of a self, and Dan is another. He's got his own self, and they're not the same selves. Whereas the Buddhists would look at us and say we're really not two separate selves.
Yeah, I think this isn't from a Hindu, but from a Muslim poet, a Sufi called Rumi. He said to imagine yourself as a droplet of water descending into the ocean. So, like, your individual soul, your individual consciousness is like this water. It's like it has a separate bubble, but when you merge, or when you have union with everything, then we're all together like in this ocean. So what they're trying to say is that the energy of your will, the energy of your spirit, it's founded in the same pool, and that energy is uprising into every individual human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think on Rand's view, I think she would say that when that individual droplet merges back into the ocean, you're gone. So if I'm a droplet and you're a droplet, once I've merged such that you and I, those two droplets, are indistinguishable, once we're just part of the ocean, ourselves are gone on Rand's view.
Yes. Well, in the Muslim view, it's the idea that your fake self, your egoic self, dies. So when you stop saying all these I thoughts, all these thoughts about me, that's a fake story about yourself. Put down all those thoughts and just be as yourself in the moment. Put down any of the stories, the fake egoic self that you tell yourself that you are. Oh, I'm this person with all these bad things that happened to me, and this is my education, and this is what I do. Put that away and just sit as who you are. And so that dying of the ego is becoming, once again, one with yourself.
Yeah, so that's where I think there's some difference. I mean, I think there is a way in which you can get some distance from your thoughts and your education. I mean, people can reform themselves, and that's definitely part of Rand's view. You're a being of self-made soul. Even if you grew up in a certain environment, come from a certain background, had a certain education and upbringing, through your volition, your will, you can affect your course in life for better or worse. So you're not simply a pawn of these things that are not up to your free will choice. But I think there's but I don't think she would want to put it in terms of like, say something like your egoic self is the fake self. I think she would probably want to insist, no, your
That's my
self.
terminology. Yeah, I guess they say it's an illusory self, I suppose, or something that you self-create and don't need to hold up, and it causes you problems.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's where Rand would differ and say, no, there's nothing wrong or problematic about the ego. And I mean, the ego is just it's a Latin term for I or self. So I guess,
Well, all the contemplative traditions, including the Christian, Muslim, I guess the Eastern ones, but within the Muslim contemplative tradition, when they say the egoic self, they mean I-related thoughts, me-related thoughts, and those are torturing people. Like just in our society today, people are having all these torturous thoughts about, oh, what will they think of me? All this kind of thoughts going on in their head. And so they're saying, let that egoic self die. Stop putting up, you're creating those thoughts. You don't have to turn on those thoughts whatsoever. You can just sit as yourself with no thoughts. So they're asking people for the sake of themselves, their own mental health, and what they spread with the world, to put down those ideas for certain periods of time at least.
mm. I mean, depending on what you mean by egoic thoughts, that I think the advice to put down egoic thoughts could be good or bad. So, I mean, if to go with the example you just gave, what do people think of me? I mean, that might be a second-handed sort of thought, where instead of focusing on reality, as distinct from what other people think about reality, including you, maybe that's an unhealthy thing to do, to always be concerned about what other people think. Are they liking my tweets and posts enough, and
Yeah.
how many friends do I have on Facebook or whatever. So yeah, that if that's what an egoic thought is, I think it could be good and healthy to get
And
some separation from that.
when you're in sadness and when you're in anger, your thoughts are only I related. They're egoic. So if we want to cure sadness and anger, we can put down the ego and they'll go away. Because what happens in sadness, right? They hurt me. They harmed me. I feel pain because of something. Also in anger, first you feel a bit of harm and then you start to feel angry. It just happens in a microsecond. Anger is a secondary emotion. So first you feel like some injustice, some pain, then you feel anger. That all comes from me thoughts, relationship with me and other. And so instead of putting the world in two, me and other, just see it as one, is what they say. And when you look through your eyes, when you immerse yourself in the activities around you, you do see it as one. You stop seeing things as two in duality. You start to, for example, if you just immerse yourself in work, thoughts about me go away, and work is what is kind of in all of your consciousness. You don't even have room for thoughts about yourself.
And you're in the zone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I've heard that. Yeah, and that can be, I think, a very good thing to be in, when you're just immersed in something.
So there the ego, according to that tradition, is dying. But that was what Ayn Rand calls ego in Howard Roark when he's like immersing himself and creating. So so people are using it in different ways, I think.
So there, yeah, this makes it a little tricky in a way. I guess what we're saying is it can be a positive thing when the ego goes away, like when you're just immersed in the work and you're not really self-aware.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a good thing, or that can be a really good thing to do. Um, so is that a case where it's
I think it
good?
makes us feel happy too. Just going into that state of all out work or like all out focus. Uh, you know, why do people enjoy snowboarding or something kind of skillful but a little bit hard? It pushes them to the edge where they're free of all those thoughts. And it's really creative and fun, right? Like they snowboard because it's fun and you get out of your head.
Mm. I guess you're still using, or maybe you're still using volition, like when you're in the zone. So to go back to that idea that your volition or your will is your self, or at least the most essential version of the self. Maybe the self still is there when you're in the zone because you're still using your volition to perform whatever activity you're performing in that zone, whether it's, designing a building or doing your snowboarding. But there's that reflective thing which is gone. You're not self-aware.
It's almost like the intensity, the energetic intensity of your will is so high to focus 100% on that activity that there's no energy left for reflective self-thought or egoic thought. So the volition can be like right on, like you've put you have a light, a dimmer switch, and you put it right at the top, kind of. And then those thoughts go away when you're right at the top of intense focus into your activity or your work.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess this is not a counterexample to the idea that yourself is your volition, but I think it is interesting that um, it can be a good thing when your self-awareness goes away, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
It can be a good
But,
experience.
like your intellect is for planning. I think it's good for planning, but then you can put it away and work for periods of time.
Yeah. You don't want to always be meta, to put it another way. It's
Yeah.
good to be
Context.
engaged. Uh, I guess to bring in another aspect of her view, there's limited crow space. So the crow epistemology, you can only hold so much in your consciousness at once, and if you're so consumed in a task in what it directly demands of you, there's no space in your consciousness to be reflective,
Yeah.
um, which is, I think, just another way of saying what you were saying.
And almost all those activities are the most enjoyable. I think that's probably why we enjoy sex as a species,
Uh,
because we can finally stop thinking and just enjoy.
uh, maybe. It, yeah, I
It
don't.
depends
I
what's
guess.
going on.
e- Yeah, I think that might be part of it. Um, you're just immersed in the moments.
And so your will and volition, I think, would still be there. I think, right? It's just um, energetic. Energetically, it's on. Your consciousness is on. Uh, that's really fully you when you're expressing yourself that way.
Um, I guess at its best, if you're, um, I'm thinking of like cases where you're like a prostitute. In that case, um, you might feel guilty if you're the prostitute. Oh, I'm just allowing myself to be used as a tool, and I'm just a body here. And in a way, there's kind of a split, a mind-body split. Instead of being totally engaged with the activity, she or he is having these distracting thoughts. Um, I shouldn't be doing this. This isn't right. I'm
Yeah,
just allowing myself to be used. Um, so yeah, I guess that's maybe that helps support your point that in sex, at least at its best, um, you're not divided. You don't have this kind of meta focus. You're just enjoying the experience.
yeah, I think so. Um, yeah, in that situation, yeah, she is. I guess she's adding on to the already bad situation by having bad thoughts on top of it. But yeah, what can you do instead leave?
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else you want to bring up here?
I don't know. I figure we covered a lot of topics. I think that's probably enough for today. I don't know if I feel more confused or more smart. I feel a little bit smarter, but maybe a little more confused as well.
Okay. Well, I hope some progress was made, even if other things became more confusing. Hopefully, some things became more clear, or at least to somebody, to some other self out there who's watching this. I hope there was some value here.
I'd love to see comments. I will reply to any comments. So,
Okay. All right. Comments so that Brian can reply and get a discussion going. Um, all right. Well, I guess we can draw a line here then. And
Okay.
thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it was absolutely very cool thought, or very cool talk, and tons of thoughts to think about. Now, back to the research. Maybe we can have a part 2 sometime.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep. Bye-bye.